There's a lie people love because it lets them sleep at night. The lie is that cancel culture killed free speech. That story is neat. It has villains. It has victims. It lets everyone who stayed silent pretend they were under siege instead of undermotivated. It frames fear as oppression and retreat as resistance. But cancel culture didn't kill free speech. Cowardice did. And not dramatic cowardice. Not running from the battle cowardice. I'm talking about modern cowardice. The socially acceptable kind. The kind that sounds like it's just not worth the stress. The kind that dresses itself up as professionalism, kindness, emotional intelligence. Free speech didn't die in a blaze of glory. It died of hesitation. People didn't stop speaking because they were silenced. They stopped because they were scared of consequences they hadn't even faced yet. They imagined the crowd before the crowd ever arrived. They pre-apologized, they pre-edited, they self-deleted. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Cancel culture didn't need to take speech away. People handed it over voluntarily, like nervous interns offering their dignity to HR. Let's get something straight. Cancel culture is not an organized force. It has no memory, no consistency, no long-term power. It's a swarm, loud, emotional, chaotic, easily distracted. It doesn't destroy ideas. It tests spines, and most spines folded. What actually changed wasn't the right to speak, but the willingness to stand in discomfort. We confused criticism with danger. We confused disagreement with violence. We started treating being disliked as a form of exile. And once that happened, speech didn't need to be banned. It just needed to feel risky. That's how cowardice works. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It says, maybe don't. Is this worth it? What if they misunderstand you? What if this costs you something? And suddenly the sentence never leaves your mouth. This is where free speech actually started dying. Not online, not publicly, but internally, in that split second where fear edits truth before it becomes sound. Self-censorship is the most effective censorship there is, because it doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like maturity, like being sensible, like being considerate, but it isn't. It's fear wearing a name badge. People say, I can't say anything anymore, but what they really mean is, I don't want to deal with the consequences of saying what I think. That's not silencing, that's avoidance. Free speech has always had consequences, always. Social ones, professional ones, sometimes physical ones. The difference is that previous generations understood that consequences were the price of speaking, not proof that speaking was forbidden. We forgot that. We live in a culture that treats discomfort as damage, where emotional unease is framed as harm, where being challenged feels like being attacked, and cowardice thrives in that environment because it offers a deal. Say less, risk less, be safe. So people shrink, they learn the choreography, they learn what language is rewarded and what language is punished. They stop asking, is this true? And start asking, is this safe to say? That single question tells you everything. Cancel culture didn't invent that mindset, it just exploited it. Because cancel culture only has power over people who believe the crowd owns them. The moment you refuse to perform the ritual apology, the moment you don't kneel, the crowd gets bored. Outrage needs participation. It needs submission. It needs visible fear. Courage starves it. But courage is expensive, it costs approval, it costs comfort, sometimes it costs money, and we've raised a generation that was taught to prioritize safety over truth and belonging over honesty. So instead of speaking clearly, people speak strategically. Instead of believing things, they gesture at beliefs. Instead of standing for something, they survive everything. And that's how free speech didn't die dramatically. It died politely. Cancel culture didn't kill free speech. Cowardice did, and in part 2, we're going to talk about what happens after cowardice becomes normal, because that's where things get dangerous.
UBN Narrator News has partnered with Adidas to bring you custom clothing for all occasions. The material is amazing and they have fits for all body sizes.
Why courage terrifies modern institutions. Once cowardice becomes normal at the individual level, institutions follow. not because they're evil, but because they're scared. Institutions don't fear cancel culture. They fear instability. They fear unpredictability. They fear anything that can't be managed, branded, or insured against. Courage is unpredictable. That's why modern institutions don't suppress speech outright. They sanitize it. They wrap it in policy language. They dilute it until it can't hurt anyone, including the truth. Universities are the clearest example. They were once built for intellectual conflict, for disagreement sharp enough to cut bad ideas apart. Now they manage feelings like a logistics operation. Debate is reframed as harm, friction is reframed as trauma, and the result isn't safer minds, it's weaker ones. Journalism followed the same path. Instead of interrogating power, it manages optics. Instead of asking uncomfortable questions, it anticipates backlash. Instead of telling hard truths, it tells approved ones in approved language. Corporations preach authenticity while enforcing ideological uniformity. Politicians speak in sentences so empty they sound pre-negotiated. Every word is risk assessed. Every belief is triangulated. Every position is reversible. This isn't censorship by force. It's censorship by incentive. Say the safe thing, keep your job. Say the approved thing, keep your platform. Say the risky thing, explain yourself forever. So people adapt. They don't lie outright. They distort. They omit. They euphemize. They learn how to sound ethical without committing to anything. That's what cowardice does at scale. It creates cultures that value consensus over truth and approval over principle. And here's the real damage. When honest people go quiet, dishonest people fill the space. When nuanced voices retreat, extremists dominate. When complexity is punished, simplicity becomes law. Cowardice doesn't create tyranny directly, it creates a vacuum. And vacuums get filled. This is why free speech matters, even when it's uncomfortable. Not because everyone should say everything, but because a culture that can't tolerate dissent can't correct itself. Strong ideas survive disagreement. Weak ideas demand protection. A culture that treats disagreement as danger will always end up fragile, paranoid, and intellectually stagnant. So what's the alternative? Not shouting, not trolling, not being edgy for sport. That's just fear dressed as bravado. Courage isn't volume. Courage is clarity. It's saying what you believe and standing there while it's challenged. It's accepting criticism without collapsing. It's learning the difference between being wrong and being immoral. It's refusing to outsource your self-respect to strangers. Free speech doesn't need to be saved from mobs. It needs to be saved from fear. Because as long as people keep choosing comfort over truth, cowardice will keep winning. And it doesn't need to cancel anyone, it just needs them to hesitate. Cancel culture didn't kill free speech, cowardice did. And the cure is still the same. Speak, risk, stand, and let courage do what fear never could. The cost of silence. Here's the part people don't want to sit with. Cowardice doesn't feel dramatic when you're inside it. It feels reasonable, it feels calm, it feels like being an adult. That's why it works. Nobody wakes up thinking, today I will abandon my principles. They wake up thinking, today I will avoid unnecessary trouble. They don't call it fear. They call it pragmatism. And that's how silence spreads. One person chooses not to speak because it's not the right moment. Another decides it's not their place. Another tells themselves someone else will say it better. Soon enough, nobody says anything at all, and the culture doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes. It becomes quieter, flatter, less curious, less honest. You start noticing that conversations feel rehearsed, that people agree too quickly, that disagreement feels tense instead of interesting, that everyone's talking, but nobody's actually saying anything. That's not harmony. That's compliance. And compliance is not peace. It's just silence with good branding. The real cost of cowardice isn't cancellation, it's atrophy. When you don't use your voice, it weakens. When you don't defend your ideas, they soften. When you don't test your beliefs against resistance, they decay. You stop knowing what you think because you've trained yourself not to finish the thought, and eventually you mistake that numbness for wisdom. This is how cultures lose their edge. Not because they were defeated, but because they got tired of standing. People like to imagine that if things ever got truly bad, they'd suddenly become brave, that there's a switch somewhere inside them, that courage will appear when it's needed. But courage doesn't work like that. Courage isn't summoned in emergencies, it's practiced in small moments. It's practiced when you say the thing you know will be unpopular, when you disagree without being cruel, when you refuse to apologize for thoughts you've actually examined, when you stay standing after the room goes quiet. If you wait until courage is convenient, you'll wait forever. And this is the quiet tragedy of our time. People with good intentions who never use them. People with sharp minds who blunt themselves to fit in. People who mistake being liked for being right. Cancel culture didn't create that. It revealed it. It showed us how many people were already bending before they were asked to kneel. So here's the uncomfortable question you actually have to answer, not online, not publicly, but privately. What did you stop saying because it felt risky? What opinion did you sand down until it meant nothing? What truth did you trade for peace? Because every time you chose comfort over honesty, cowardice learned it could rely on you. And cowardice doesn't stop once it's fed. Free speech doesn't disappear because it's outlawed. It disappears because people decide it's not worth defending. Not today, not right now, not in this moment. And then suddenly, there's no moment left. Cancel culture didn't kill free speech. Cowardice did. And the only way out is painfully simple. Say the thing. Stand there. Let the discomfort pass through you instead of ruling you. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be cruel. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop being silent on behalf of fear. Because the moment you do, free speech doesn't need saving. It remembers where it lives. Not right, not left, just real.